This meeting is being recorded.
So thank you everyone for joining. This is the WEConnect International in the Middle East webinar series. And I'm going to share my screen here so you can all see who we are. Thank you for joining the webinar on selling to large companies. We are really honored to have 4 of our member buyers joining us today. I'm Patricia Langen. I am the Regional Director for the Middle East for WEConnect International. And I'm going to run through our agenda today. We'll just talk about the objectives and we'll do short introductions for the speakers. Then the core of the webinar is a panel discussion among those 4 member buyer companies. And we'll open it up to question and answers. And at that time, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask questions, you can. But in the meantime, if you think of questions you'd like us to consider, please chat them in. I'll be looking at the chat. And then we'll close with some key takeaways. What I'd like to do is actually start by reviewing the objectives of the webinar. We're going to talk about how procurement works at large companies that are WEConnect International member buyers. And these companies represent a variety of industries. We'll talk about the role of buyers in those companies and the challenges that buyers face and how suppliers can help solve those challenges. And then what buyers expect from suppliers. So I'm expecting there to be some great tips as we go. What I'd like to start with, though, is a short introduction of WEConnect International. We are new in the Middle East, although we have women-owned businesses in our network from 125 countries. So I thought it's probably helpful for me to give you an overview of what our goals are. First of all, I wanted to start with some interesting statistics. Up to at least a third of all businesses in the world are owned by women. Businesses with at least one female founder perform 63% better than companies with only male founders. And if men and women participated equally in the economy, global GDP would increase by $28 trillion. So, you know, I think that this is all to say that women really are at the center of global business, and that's why WEConnect International exists. There are some other really key statistics that explain why we do what we do. First of all, globally, women control $20 trillion in consumer spending and make 85% of all the consumer purchasing decisions. Let that sink in here. 85% of all the consumer purchasing decisions. But on the other hand, today, less than 1% of all large corporate and government procurement spend across the globe goes to women-owned businesses. So only 1% of spend goes to women-owned businesses. We see this as a huge opportunity, and so that's why we exist. Our mission is to drive money into the hands of women business owners by enabling them to compete in the global marketplace. We were established 11 years ago by corporate member buyers to provide certification of women-owned businesses based outside the United States. So who are our member buyers? They are some of the largest buying organizations in the world. We were originally established by private corporations, many of whom are speaking today. But we now have as member buyers large international organizations as well, including the World Bank, the IMF, and the United Nations. These are all organizations that want to buy more from women-owned businesses. We actually are the only global NGO working with member buyers to identify, register, certify, train, and connect women-owned businesses based outside the United States to succeed in global markets. And today, as I mentioned, we have 125 countries represented in our database. This is a database that our member buyers use every day. They look for women-owned businesses, they post RFPs, etc. So it's really a great opportunity to be in our database. And we have more than 14,000 women-owned businesses in the database today. These are our member buyers. And in the 2 years that I've worked for WEConnect, we have increased our member buyership by 50%. So I started, it was less than 100 member buyers. Today we have 159, and we continue to grow. So this just shows that buying from women and what we call supplier diversity and inclusion is not just a nice to have for large buyers these days, it's a need to have. Our definition of women-owned business is that the business is at least 51% owned by one or more women, and the company is also managed and controlled by women. This is the world's gold standard for women ownership. And we, you can join, as the women-owned business, you can join WEConnect International by registering for free on our database. And I will be sending these slides out later with the links to register, but I'll also chat in the link to register as we're going along. And I hope you do that immediately after the webinar. We also offer certification, which is an independent verification of ownership, management, and control. That is a fee for service, and it's available in 50 countries. We will have that available in the UAE by 2023. It's not available today, but it will be available. And I can answer more questions for you about that if you're interested. When you certify, you get the right to use the women-owned logo, which is pretty great. So what I'd like to do is to jump into our webinar, and thank you again for joining us. We have 4 representatives of our member buyers here today. I'd like to introduce from Accenture, Suman Jacobs. He's the procurement lead for the Middle East, and he has more than 25 years experience in sourcing, category management, contract negotiations, etc. And he also has worked in a variety of different industries as well. So he comes with a wealth of knowledge, and I do want to thank Accenture for being one of our founding members in the UAE, and they're helping us to start up there. Next, we have from PepsiCo, Donna Alkuli. She's the Procurement Director, Capability, Productivity, and Governance for AMISA. And she also is a seasoned procurement professional. She has a supply chain based experience within pharmaceuticals and food and beverage industry. And thank you very much, Donna, for joining us today. We also have from Marriott, Chris Moore, who's the Director for Procurement Contracting in EMEA. And again, as you can see, we have a lot. We have like probably 200 years of procurement experience on the panel today. And he has a long history working in hospitality, catering, food and beverage, hotel, etc. And I want to, last but not least, I want to introduce P&G's Nihal Hashish, who's the Senior Purchasing Manager, Paper Packaging and Supplier Diversity, Middle East and Africa. And she is also a huge champion for supplier diversity and inclusion in the Middle East and Africa. And she actually is also representing a member buyer, Procter and Gamble, who is a founding member for us in the UAE. And Nihal has been a key inspiration in creating this webinar series. So I'm going to jump now into our discussion. And these are the 7 questions that I am going to be asking. How does procurement work? What is the role of buyers at your corporation? What are challenges you face as a buyer? Who can suppliers help you? How can suppliers help you solve those challenges? Sorry for that typo. And what do you expect from suppliers? And what categories do you seek over the next 12 to 18 months? And then, of course, what advice can you offer suppliers? Any tips we always welcome. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing just so that we can sort of see our panelists a little more clearly. And what I'd love to do is just start with you, Nihal, if you don't mind. Tell us a little bit about how procurement works at your corporation.
Okay, thank you, Patricia, and good afternoon to everyone. My name is Nihal Hashish, and I'm part of Procter and Gamble's purchasing team. So today, P&G or the purchasing team owns every single dollar spent by the company, whether it's goods and services. We spend approximately about $45 billion a year across the world. And we manage every single thing. Nothing goes beyond purchases. So your gateway to working with P&G should always be from purchases. We do first the validation. We, of course, if there's a need for the goods and services, you could come with your competitive advantage, present what you have to for the buyer, for the respective buyer, and then according to what the business needs, and if there is an overall value provided to the company, then we will proceed with the qualification and vendor registration.
Cool. Thank you so much. Suman, do you want to add on to that? What's similar or different at Accenture?
Sorry, I was on mute. So yeah, within Accenture, buying involves mitigation of risk and ensuring that we are qualifying the right supplier to provide the necessary services as required by our stakeholders. So we work with our internal stakeholders and our external stakeholders as our suppliers and ensure that there is a collaborative approach between both the entities. And while doing so, we try and ensure that there is definitely the right attitude and right engagement with each party so that we all add value to the end customer that we are servicing to.
Great. Donna, do you want to tell us a little bit about how procurement works at your company?
Yeah, sure. So procurement at PepsiCo is a global function and it is category-based. So we have six sectors between North America, Latam, Europe, AMESA, and APAC. And there are procurement teams that are based in each market so as to be in close, contact to the business and also to our suppliers. And within each market, we have a chief procurement officer. And our target is to deliver against the business priorities. So the business sets priorities, how to become, as we call them, stronger, faster, and better on the strategic long-term vision. So we look into things like innovation, and we look into sustainability, into increasing localization, expanding on digitalization, and of course, giving the right focus on supplier diversity. And we connect with our internal stakeholders and with our suppliers to bring or to increase our supply base in a way that would serve the business and at the same time create a competitive, let's say, and healthy supply base for our business.
Okay, thanks. Chris, do you want to add anything on to that?
Good afternoon, everyone. The way to explain how we work within procurement within Marriott is that if you look at the products that you have or you supply, would that be on a global basis, a continental basis, or a countrywide, or even a few hotels? So for globally, we have Pepsi, which is everywhere. We have eCloud products. Continent-wise, we would have products such as uniforms, where it would be just something that would happen within the MEA or Europe or EMEA region. And then clusters, that would be either a group of countries or a group of hotels where it makes sense to supply to those areas with your products. So you may have a local product. By local might be a few country-wides or a few hotel-wides, but it makes sense that it wouldn't make sense to go on a continental or a global level.
Great, thank you. Chris, let me stick with you. So tell me, what's the role of buyers at your corporation? So
our roles is to identify the hotel's needs, and that could be a service or a product, food item, OS&E. What we call OS&E is products that goes into rooms, so beds, bedding, carpets, kitchen equipment, and that sort of thing. And so we are identifying anything that we haven't contracted that many hotels may use the same product, and then from that we will put a contract together with a supplier who will then get a good price and a quality of service, which will then be available to the hotels within the cluster, continental or globally, depending on the type of contract. And that's our role. Yeah.
Does anyone else, I'm wondering, like Nihal, is your role different in any way than that?
Well, well, yes, a bit, yes and no. So yes, I mean, at the end, we act as the gateways for what's happening outside, and we bring whatever is needed to the business. But there's also, I mean, delivering the aid, looking at the overall value, we need to ensure always that we bring the best value from a cost, cash, and quality. Second thing is that we ensure there's the supply chain for whether it's either good or service is resilient and is executed with excellence. Last but not least is we bring, if there is a business need, we tackle it and we go to the outside and bring it. And if there is an innovation for something we don't know that we need, but it might be a good thing to have, or something, an unknown need we've had, we take it to the business and act like a gateway or a bridge connecting the outside within.
That's so interesting, that idea of an unknown need, you know, and you're sort of scouting for new innovations. That's very interesting. Donna, do you ever do that?
Yeah, so it's pretty similar to what Nihal mentioned. And it is basically, we need to stay as a procurement function or as buyers in close alignment with the business, as I mentioned, and with the industry as well, so that we ensure we always meet the business requirements, and yet we bring, you know, the best in class from what is out there in the market. So our buyers are basically strategic sourcing team. They are divided between those that are buying at global level for let's say the categories that are or has common suppliers across the different sectors, and others who are buying at local levels for the categories for which the suppliers are local or let's say regional. And it starts from understanding like the business need, assessing the supply and demand market, developing strategy, introducing new suppliers, aligning the business on that, and finally, you know, the negotiating, contracting, and all of that while managing, of course, the supplier relationships.
Anybody else have anything else to add about the role of the buyer, or like what you do day to day?
So, Patricia, if I may add, so basically, my counterparts and colleagues from the procurement industry has already covered almost all the points. So we also have a similar approach. The only thing is that we have two way of approach. One is either it's looking at the past, what we have spent with various suppliers across the board in the previous financial year, and trying to identify what is the potential opportunity of spend for the next year, and working with our key internal stakeholders and identifying the opportunities of spend. And then there are opportunities which come up on an ad hoc basis, which cannot be forecast. It could be a new requirement that is demanded by the respective stakeholders or internal teams, which we need to fulfill. And in those cases, we need to identify the right supplier with the capabilities and skill that needs, so that they can deliver as per the demand of the stakeholders.
So Suman, let me stick with you. So what challenges do you typically face as a buyer? We've heard some things about, you know, stronger, faster, better, cost, cash, quality. I assume that those are things that are always at the front of your mind. But what are some specific challenges that you face as a buyer that you think suppliers should know about?
A couple of challenges that could always come up is reliability and trustworthiness. Of course, it's a relationship that needs to be built between the buying organization and the selling organization. And therefore, there has to be a mutual trust and mutual reliability, where when we are committing our spend with the supplier needs to be able to deliver what has been promised, to ensure that the final client and the stakeholder are not let down, and this delivery happens on time and as per the promises that have been made.
Yeah, so relationship is really, really important, right? Donna, let me go to you. So what are some challenges that you face as a buyer? Like, give me an example from just like the last 2 weeks that you can think of.
Okay, so I would elaborate a bit more from the day-to-day, getting the right quality or getting the right service and all these challenges. I would say that as a procurement team, we're facing the internal challenge, let's say, which is to deliver against the business P&L. So we have a set P&L, and while the market is facing high levels of volatility, we as procurement team need to find ways, resources, expand our supply base in a way that we deliver on the business P&L. Now, for the external challenges, they are more, I would say, what is going on in the world. So we're facing the macros risks, we're facing the fluctuation in commodity prices, same as all other buyers or all other industries. Yet, in addition, if we look at like AMESA, or let's say the countries that we operate in, here we have additional, challenges, which is the forex fluctuation, the governmental regulations, etc., etc. And that's why we always try to look and increase our local sourcing. So this is very important thing for us. So basically increases our supply security when our sourcing is locally and not imported. Yeah, so these are basically the challenges, let's say, in a broad way.
So I would imagine that a lot of the women-owned businesses on the line are happy to hear that you're trying to increase local sourcing, and one of the primary reasons is for supply security. And I think keeping that in mind, that buyers are always looking at mitigating risks, et cetera, is really important. I'm going to switch to some of the questions here that we've got chatted in. Somebody did ask, do the buying teams only focus on products, or do they include services too, such as coaching and training? Donna, the answer is yes, it includes services.
Yes, of course,
yes,
yeah.
Yes. Okay. And I think we've addressed this question about top pain points, but maybe I'll ask Chris and Nihal what their pain points are. So Chris, are there like, what are some of your key pain points that you're dealing with? Just think about the last 2 weeks or something.
Last 2 weeks. So it's price rises, supply issues, and sustainability. So price hikes, yeah, the suppliers are emailing all the time saying we've got to put the prices up. And I say, will you let us know when the price goes down? Because this may not happen. It's not going to be always that high price. And yes, say it's a supply issues as well. So we are, let's say uniforms, we might have an EMEA-wide agreement, but we have a supply issue. So we're starting to look more local, which would be really helpful for yourselves to look at that. And sustainability is getting higher and higher on our agenda, where our guests are demanding more, asking what is Marriott doing about their sustainability. So if your products you're supplying sustainable products, that's a real help to us.
Mm-hmm.
What are the pain points? Yeah, that's kind of like pretty much what it is. It's what our pain points are. Yeah.
Thank you, Nihal. Do you want to add anything about pain points?
Yes. So, I mean, adding to what Dana said, the uncertainties that we see here in the Middle East and Africa is a very big pain point for us. And that's why we always ensure that our supply chain is resilient and having business continuity plans. So for example, you were just asking about something that happened within the last 2 weeks. We actually had one of our top suppliers in Pakistan had a fire incident in their warehouse. And due to the right business continuity plans that we had other suppliers that could cover for the supplier, as well as the supplier managed to have inventory for us in another warehouse. So all this is covered us. So it's always, so the key 2 pain points is, 1, supply chain resilience, ensuring that our supply chain is resilient. And second one is, everyone I think is facing this nowadays, is the commodities. There's a rise in the commodity prices across raw and packed materials, as well as availability. So this has been an issue we've been facing, and that's why ensuring that we are, as with COVID and with everything that's happening, having the right contingency plans, as well as relationships that would help ensure product availability.
So when you say relationships that will ensure product availability, tell me more about what a relationship means in that case. What does it mean? That you can pick up the phone anytime you want, that, you know, they're willing to negotiate on price. What for you, maybe take an example of, let's take an example of a service, because it does seem people are really interested in services on this call.
Yes. So I haven't been working in services for quite some time, but definitely strategic relationships is something that is important for us. Having the right trusting relationship, it's a two-way street, knowing that the supplier understands that and that they are our extended partners. They are part of the organization. So once this is with them, I mean, it's then it becomes our win is their win and our loss is their loss. So knowing this would always help them, would make them go the extra mile for this sort of relationship. Having this emotional bank account between the two suppliers, because it's usually when you have a trusting and open relationship with the supplier or with the partner, you're always willing to do something for that person. So it's not just numbers, but there needs to be the emotional and EQ connection from an EQ standpoint, sorry.
For, in terms of emotional intelligence, right?
Yes.
So we have, I want to stick with you, Nihal. We have a chatted in question that is sort of really essential. We're talking about how it's important to know your customer and understand your needs at Procter and Gamble on the part of the supplier. But how can suppliers know what the business needs are? Can you give a few tips about where they can look for intelligence to better understand what your needs, Nihal, is in packaging? I know your focus is packaging these days, right?
Yes. Yeah. So it's always very important to do a market analysis. For example, in my case, I buy cartons and corrugated. If you are a packaging supplier, it's always good to understand what is in the market. Go to the supermarket, check the products, look at your suppliers or your potential suppliers' packaging. What do they want? What are usually the specifications you use? How can you improve it? Do your right analysis, do your right studies on it. Second thing is, a lot of customers or a lot of companies have a portal where they share their business needs. For example, we in P&G have run a program called Unbox here in the Middle East, where we have posted our wicked problem statements coming from the business, and where we've invited startups to present their solutions for it. And then we take the top 3 solutions and present it to the business. So we always count on the suppliers or startups, name it, whether you're new or incumbent, to come up with solutions. You always need to know, as a potential supplier, you need to know what is your competitive advantage and what does your potential customer want. You need to address a problem.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. So you need to address a problem, not just come and offer services, but this service needs to address a certain problem that you potentially see that this customer has.
Great. I wonder if anybody else has advice about how a supplier can gather the right intelligence to really know what PepsiCo, Marriott, or Accenture needs. Any other tips?
I think it's to say, do the homework, ask questions. Any contacts you have within Marriott, doesn't matter how, they don't have to be in procurement or purchasing. Ask them what's going on, what is the latest that's happening. So we give an example. We had a supplier who was pushing a kind of chat function, a kind of an outdated one. Now, if you'd have asked the questions, you'd realize we have a chat function on our mobile app now. And it's things like that where you just ask questions about what is the latest things that we're working on and how can you be involved in that. And I would say, if you know somebody in Marriott, go and talk to them, because then they will probably email someone in procurement rather than you trying to contact somebody in procurement directly yourself, because it's a cold call. If that makes sense.
Got it. Ask questions. Yeah, Donna?
Yeah, I would add to Chris's point. So it starts with approaching us. So it would, like, sometimes we know about the supplier, so we go and, you know, we issue an RFP and suppliers start to quote and so on. But when a certain supplier is interested, you know, to supply, for example, PepsiCo with any goods or services, just approach us. As Chris mentioned, whether the email reached to the procurement directly or to any other department, it will end up at procurement. But what would make us interested is if that supplier is offering something that would solve a problem that is currently there in the market. For example, everybody knows that PepsiCo, if you go to the website, we're working on sustainability. We're trying to reduce the plastic footprints or whatever. So if that supplier comes with an innovative idea, with a new thing, that would make us even more interested to, you know, reach out to them and get into a meeting and see what they have to offer. So yeah, so always offering solutions, new ideas, that would be encouraging.
Can I stick with you, Donna, because we have a few questions related to how can people actually send you an email or get in touch with you? There's a question here about sort of, we've been talking about the pain points sort of at the macro level, sort of company-wide, but for an SME, sometimes they don't know how to get visibility with the procurement team. They just don't know. I mean, obviously, coming to WEConnect International events, participating in what we call Meet the Member events is a great way to get to know people like you. Those don't happen all the time, but are there other ways that SMEs can gain visibility with procurement teams?
Yes, so if they go to the PepsiCo website, there is always, you know, an email or like a contact us. So they can definitely reach out. And if they know, like, in addition, you know, the traditional way, if you know, for example, you're trying to supply PepsiCo Egypt and you know someone in finance, or you don't know anyone in procurement, but you know someone in finance or in sales or wherever. So reach out to them and they'll give the contact for procurement. So in every market, we do have a procurement, you know, team that is there and approachable.
That's great. Anybody else have other ideas? What I'm hearing Donna say basically is leverage any contact you have at that company and ask them to get you in touch with someone from the right person from procurement, right?
Yeah, what is important is primarily to understand what the company is working on, or what is their business model, or what are they related to. Because as a service organization, we do not buy a lot of material except for our few internal requirements when it comes to IT supplies and so on and so forth. But the rest of it is all related to services. So it would be important for the supplier organization to understand what kind of company they are reaching out to, and understanding what could be the potential items that would be required from them based on what they have to offer. Otherwise, what happens, it becomes irrelevant when they just send random mail if it is not relevant to the type of industry or business that the company is operating in.
Sorry, I was just thinking, I'm mulling over because you also may supply something that we have never even thought of. And I'll give you an example. So I was at a conference, nothing to do with work. It was a private conference, and I'm sitting in the conference, and the conference is nothing to do with what this lady got on the stage to talk about. She says, I want to give up my job in banking. I really feel that I want to get involved in sustainability. I said, oh, that's interesting. And I went down to the local market and I picked up some vegetables that were being thrown away, and I made some pickles, and I employed a few ladies, and it kind of built from there. I wrote that idea down. I didn't act on that idea till 2 years later, when somebody in our organization said, Chris, have you got any ideas of like sustainability? I said, I've got this idea about this lady who makes pickles from things that are going to be thrown away. Oh, let's get her in. She came in, she presented her products, she went into all 50 Marriotts within the UK. She's since been listed in all the major retailers within the UK, Waitrose, Sainsbury's, you name it. But it's things like that. So just be aware that you never know who's sitting out there that who might be listening to your ideas. That just encourage you. Just keep talking about your product. You don't have to come to a WeConnect, not saying WeConnect, but or contact suppliers direct.
Yeah.
You can do it in other ways as well. But it is, I would say, come with ideas that maybe we haven't even thought of would be really good.
And that gets to another question that was here when we were talking about, I think it was you, Chris, mentioned exactly this about needs we hadn't even thought we didn't know we had.
Yeah.
And
so,
2 years later, it might become a need, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a need and it's a story as well. I mean, that was an amazing story I never forgot. And there's other suppliers who have come with their stories of their background of how they came to do what they're doing. It's a very, very powerful thing to tell to, certainly within procurement and within an organization. I'm sure organizations like stories to tell. And if you've got stories, tell us and we'll tell them for you as well. They're really, really helpful. I just wanted to say that as well. You don't be afraid of telling your story.
And that also gets to the relationship building part too, right? Yeah, Donna, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just had an idea on how to reach us. So if it's not through, let's say, the PepsiCo website, the supplier can always use LinkedIn. So we are all there on LinkedIn. So you can just search for procurement executive and you will have a whole list and it will show in which country that person is. So this is another way, let's say, to reach out. And maybe we're now more into the digitalization and how can we use artificial intelligence. So this might be also an area that we can, work on, have a chatbot or a robot to work, as a hotline to receive requests from suppliers and then divert, to the related categories. So we can also, the scheme up now, so we can also, place this as a coming thing.
And also, if you know anybody else who's doing the similar things to you, so like the lady who was, the company's called Rubies in the Rubble, if you wanted to look it up, she knew a guy called Jude's Ice Cream who looks after, he gives up 3 months of his time a year to help drug addicts in other countries. So we're now stocking all his products in the UK. It's all that networking that is really, really helpful.
And also, if I can add on that, is since we are having this conference or webinar based on a women entrepreneur and encouraging them to do business with large corporations. So as a part of the introduction, I think it would be also good to mention that the selling organization is a women-owned business. So that will give an extra traction because there could be many suppliers that are reaching out to the procurement organization as well. And then depending on the requirements, the requirement may not be current, but especially when it is identified as a women-owned business, it would definitely give a visibility and interest that is going to be raised with the procurement organization. Maybe not with an immediate need, but at least to save it in their records for future utilization.
And I think that as Nihal, sorry, I was just going to jump in that this is a really good point. Many of our member buyers say that they're not entirely sure how many women-owned suppliers there are, the legacy suppliers they have, and they have to go through a lot of effort to find out. So for our member buyers, everyone on the line, just realize they all want to buy from women-owned suppliers. So tell them you're women-owned if you're women-owned. Okay, sorry, go ahead, Nihal.
Yeah, no, so to build on this point, it's becoming more of a need for us to find some diverse suppliers. So in this part of the world, we're talking about women-owned businesses. So it's your doorstep, or it's your way to get into the doorstep, sorry, to put your foot into the door. So you need to clearly mention it. You need to be registered on WeConnect portal, because this WeCommunity, this is a database that most of us, the members in WeConnect, use to identify potential suppliers that they can use that are diverse as well. This helps us a lot. For Procter and Gamble, we have a website, pgsupplier.com, where it has an automated email. If you connect with the email address, it would put you with the right cluster leader, and will take you forward to the right cluster and buyer. So I highly encourage you to leverage all these points. And like Dana mentioned, LinkedIn. Christopher also mentioned, I mean, any contact you have in the company that would connect you later on to the right cluster leader from a purchasing standpoint, or a buyer, sorry.
Just to explain that so within Marriott, that one of our processes is that for every tender that we carry out, there's over a certain amount, it's not a huge amount, we have to look for a diverse supplier to be included. We have to actively look, and what we do, that we go onto a database to find a WeConnect member to include in the tender. So we're actively, so if you can advertise the fact you're a WeConnect member, that really will help within our process. We have to have what's called an exemption form of why have you given this business to a non-diverse supplier. We have to have that. Let's just explain how actively we are looking for diverse suppliers within our company.
That is really important to point out, Chris. Many women-owned businesses don't realize that, for example, Marriott would have to provide an exemption form to explain why you gave the business to a non-diverse supplier, right? Yeah. So everyone, the world is changing. And as I said, even WeConnect has grown by 50% in 2 years. This is the future. So, be upfront about it. And I've put into the chat how you can register on the database. You'll be visible to all the member buyers speaking today, as well as us. And if any of the member buyers on the line want to put your own email addresses or websites that people can go to, I think now's an opportunity to share that with everyone. I wanted to also now ask a final question, which is, you could choose between the two questions, panelists. Either what categories are you looking for over the next 12 to 18 months, or give one piece of advice that the suppliers should not ignore, and maybe even tell them one action they should take after they finish the webinar. So you could choose from any of those things. And then we'll move to open questions and answers. So. Chris, you want to start?
Okay, yeah, I've already kind of said mine. It is tell your story. Okay. I can't stress how powerful your story is to a buyer. We can go through the process, the tender process, and all the RFPs, but you sit in front of somebody, even virtually, and tell them your story. That will just absolutely get their attention.
I can add to this is also know your competitive advantage and what value you bring to the table. It's very important to share what's your added value. Be also clear and concise on your message track, and make sure that you develop a relationship with the respective buyer that you would like to work with.
Thank you. Great advice.
I would like to add that, know the company that you are trying to sell to. What are the important things? What are the things that matter for them? So if we are saying PepsiCo, then we're looking sustainability, we're looking digitalization, we're looking innovation, we're looking localization. So try to bring advantage in one of these areas. And I would also answer the question, Patricia, regarding which category. So basically we're buying, there is nothing like for the next 12 to 18 months, we're buying across the different direct materials, let's say, and indirect goods and services. So anything can be of interest to us. So I will not be specific to say, because we don't have, something that came up just like new thing and we're not finding a supplier for, but all our portfolio is open. So it doesn't really, I wouldn't specify one specific service or goods.
Great, thank you. Simon, you want to add anything?
Yeah, from again, from Accenture's point of view, like Dana also mentioned, we also do not have any specific item that we could tell at the moment. Our requirements are being reviewed every year based on the spend that we had last year and new requirements that keep coming up. We work across all categories and commodities. Therefore, understand what the organization is about, and identify your niche skills, and then pitch yourself to the company. Our contact details will also share, in the sense that also identifying yourself as a women-owned business. So it will definitely increase the interest and encourage us to reach out and see how we can engage with all of you and maximize our business relationship.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I want to thank all the panelists. I'm going to invite the participants, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask another question that we didn't address or any new thoughts you have. And also note that the panelists have put in here their the email addresses or the websites you can look at. So
I
we
would
will
add
make
a
from you.
here, Patricia, and sorry, I have a hard stop later, so I would just add one comment. Thank you very much for you and for the panelists. Great session, very informative, and I hope that this is only one from a number that comes, and we'll dig deeper into more questions that are of interest. But I will leave the suppliers with one note and one idea, is that we would love to work with you directly, don't misunderstand me. That's there, but we will also have the ability to work with our suppliers to work with you. So if you are a tier 2 supplier or what we call an up the stream type of supplier who supplies materials that becomes part of the material that we buy, please also, again, as Dana said, as Nihal said, know your customer, know what goes into that material. And if you can, and you own a company that is a woman managed and or woman owned and has that material, reach out to us. We can definitely work and influence our suppliers to qualify you, to validate you as one of our indirect suppliers. So that's something that I would really strongly advise, because not everyone can be a direct suppliers in all the cases.
That is great advice. We've got to think about the whole value chain and working with tier 2 suppliers too, and that Nabil, your company can introduce these women-owned businesses to your own suppliers, right? Yeah, that's a great point.
Hi, Patricia. I just want to say to everybody here, thank you so much for your time. I'm based in London, in the UK, and I've joined a couple of these webinars, and I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of every female-run SME out here for taking the time out. And I think what I wanted to ask as well, I guess, is I understand about the localization and understand how you can mitigate risk by using that. But is there scope to use SME service providers outside of the realm of the GCC as well? Is there are you open for that, or do they have to only be within the GCC?
Sorry, Michelle, sound a bit thick. What's a GCC?
The Gulf, was it Gulf
Gulf Cooperation Council countries, yeah.
What?
Well, Gulf countries in the Gulf.
You're with me.
So Michelle, just to understand your question, why did you refer to the GCC in specific for localization?
Because I saw it written down in one of the emails that we get sent out. It said only working with people within the GCC. So I thought, oh.
Okay. Okay, so I would answer for PepsiCo. When we say localization, we mean it's the country where we are operating in. So it can be Egypt. So for Egypt plants, we would like to source from Egypt. For Saudi PepsiCo plants, we would like to source from Saudi, and so on. So it's not related, to a specific region or area, or just the country that we are manufacturing in. That's for us, localization would be meaning that specific country.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying.
And Donna,
Sure.
can I follow up with that question? What are the reasons for localization? We talked about risk management, but what are the risks of not buying local? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so when we're not buying locally, we are at the risk of the forex fluctuate, not only fluctuation, but if you recall, at a certain time, it was so hard to get foreign currency out of Egypt, for example.
Right.
Okay, to do a bank transfer at certain time. So we were having hard time paying our suppliers even. The other thing, you know, with the regulations, lockdowns, border, you know, border issues, closures, and so on in our region. So we find that it is much, in terms of supply security, it's much more secure to source locally. And the other and most important thing is that we are, you know, supporting the country itself. So we are supporting the community, we're supporting the people that work in that country. So that this is good for the country's financial situation as well, not only for PepsiCo.
Thank you so much.
And just to add
Ryan.
on top of what Dana mentioned, even with the local initiatives, there are many statutory requirements, as not requirements from a statutory, but still encouraged by the government to maximize business with the local service providers so that the local content can be increased, and which has got nowadays in the Middle East as well, many countries have got the certification related to such localization programs like the ICV in UAE or Qatar or Saudi Arabia, which they are actively asking for each public tender that needs to be attended to.
Yeah, adding to that also the taxes I forgot to mention. So across the years, we've been seeing, you know, the government come and pay import on sugar or on whatever. So also that is
Got it. Makes sense.
And certain countries also have withholding taxes, like Saudi Arabia. If you're buying something from outside Saudi, you need to end up paying a big amount of withholding taxes for outstation invoices.
You have anti-dumping duties. So, I mean, both of you shared everything, right? But there's also the anti-dumping duties if you're talking about products coming from the outside. So not just services. So it's always there.
And also would like to mention that even like we're working with global suppliers, and what we try to do with these global suppliers is try to bring them into the countries that we're operating in, for them to do a local investment and become a local supplier. So this is also one of the things that we're constantly working on.
Okay, great. That's good to know. Any more questions from the audience? All right, well, listen, you guys have our emails, and we're going to have future webinars, and member buyers will be on those future webinars as well. So I encourage you to join them. I'm going to share my screen here for a second, just to point out some opportunities we have. I'm going to forward this. We reviewed some things we learned today about how procurement works, the roles of buyers, the challenges they face, sort of how you can help solve those challenges as suppliers and what buyers expect from you as suppliers. We talked about some key takeaways, and I'd love the participants to think about what are you going to do in the next 4 weeks based on what you learned today. I just added some key takeaways. I'm going to change this. I'm going to send you the slides. We're going to add on. But I do also want to encourage you, if you haven't, Nihal and I are working on a training program that is running March 7th to 10th in Dubai at the Procter and Gamble offices. It's like a mini MBA, and senior executives from Procter and Gamble will be delivering the content, everything from strategy to procurement to digital marketing, etc. We will accept women-owned businesses that are at least 51% owned by women who are based in the GCC, okay? And we formally closed the applications Friday, but I still have them open. So if any of you apply, once you get off this webinar, you will still be in the mix, okay? But tomorrow I've got to cut it off. And I encourage you to apply within the next hour. Then, as I mentioned, the best way to be visible to member buyers, like the ones we heard today, PepsiCo, Accenture, Procter and Gamble, and Marriott, and 154 more, is to register on our database. We keep all your information confidential. The buyers can see whatever you want to put in your profile. You get more invitations to events, and it's great networking. I thank you very much. We're at time. We're going to stick around for 30 minutes if you want to hang out and network with each other and meet each other. That's part of what we do at WeConnect, is try to help women-owned businesses do business with each other as well. So I want to thank the panelists, Donna, Chris, Saman, and Nihal. And this recording will be on YouTube, so you can all share it with your friends. And please, word of mouth is the best way we're going to grow this network. So please ask your friends who are also women business owners to register and to join the next event. And thumbs up to everybody. So thank you very much. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia, and all. I will need to drop off, running into another call. It was a pleasure, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Donna.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure. Thank you, Patricia, for organizing this.
Thank you, Nihal, for helping me put this together. Thank you, Saman and Chris, for joining.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.
Michelle, thank you for including what your next steps are going to be. I'm very impressed. You're going to complete your registration on WeConnect International. You're going to connect with all this.
I've got a big network of women in business, and so what I want to do is connect with you guys first, experience it, and then I can, because I like to do my due diligence first, and then I'm definitely going to share it. And they're very global, but it's quite a big network, and I think they'll really love to be a part of this.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I do want to point out that we are in every region of the world. I'm the regional director for the Middle East. We have regional directors for Europe, Africa, Latin America, North America, East, Southeast Asia, and also South Asia. So there's, and we're running webinars all the time and training. So look at our event calendar, and we're doing that all over the world.
Definitely do that. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Hind. Thanks, Stevie. Thanks, Bahia. Thanks, Daria, for being here and taking notes.
Of course, it's super interesting for me.
It was super interesting for me, too.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we clarified why they're buying local. There are a lot of good reasons to buy local, Lagona, hi, I hope you're doing well. If anybody wants to turn their video on or unmute themselves, they're welcome to. I'm going to stop the recording, actually. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording.